So what should I put on first? I've got lots of things to show you. I think what I'll do first is show you some transfer foil. Now, when I work, I tend to work in roughly tones of 1 or 2 colors, because if the background is too stripy, you can't see what you're putting on there, and it just ends up looking a bit messy and you can't really see one thing or the other. When you start doing this, if you haven't worked with Bondaweb like this before, then don't worry about that. Just play and see what happens and see what will stick, see what won't stick. So this is transfer foil. This is gold transfer foil. You can get it in lots of different colors. You can get oil on water, every color, every plain color. You can get so many different stripes and rainbows and things, but I find single colors probably better, because again, you're layering color, so you don't need anything too stripy and too jazzy. This is already reasonably stripy already. So you use the foil color side up. It's not the way that you expect. And the foil comes off underneath the plastic carrier sheet. And of course, you can't see through the foil, so you don't actually know where it's going to go. So what I tend to do is have a rough idea where I want it to go on the work. I pop my finger on there. Then I have my baking parchment on the top. Keep my finger there. And then with the side of the iron, not the flat of the iron, I just rest the iron. You don't have to press. It's the heat that does the work. It's a very relaxing process, this. So just put your shoulders down, relax your neck. Remember, this is not a washable process. The only washable processes were the ones that I showed you in the first video, with the applique and foiling onto plain unpainted Bondaweb. So you can see that the foil has stuck wherever the glue is. So I could add a little bit more if I wanted to. And obviously I'm not ironing with the flat of the iron, because I would cover everything in transfer foil. And having spent the time painting it and waiting for it to dry, it would be very annoying. So you always use the side of your iron and just relax, as I say, and then take off the foil. There we go. Now I've run the iron across here, and there's no Bondaweb there, so obviously the foil isn't going to stick there. Okay, so that's transfer foil. And then what shall I show you next? I might show you the mica flakes. These are mica flakes. Mica is a naturally occurring mineral, and you can dye it. You can get very large sheets of it for scrapbooking and card making. These are very small, scattery pieces. This is a nice kind of bronzy gold, so that will work quite nicely. Don't worry about putting a colour that's similar to what you're putting it on. You will see it. It's just maybe not immediately, and it just draws your eye in. We're not looking for anything too flashy, she said, covering her piece in mica flakes. What I do is I tend to work in drifts in the same direction. And I don't know if you noticed, but I've also torn the Bondaweb in the direction that the ripples are going as well. So everything's going in the same direction. That way you get to see more of the texture and decoration that you're putting on. These tend to leap about a little bit, but try to get them in drifts. And always put the lid back on, Kim. So I'm just going to move them around a bit. If some of them overlap, they won't stick to the Bondaweb, because they're obviously on top of a piece of mica, and they may well fall off. But the ones that are touching the Bondaweb will stick. So I'm just going to move those around a bit. So I've got a few little scattered bits there. Could open up those a bit. I think these might be a little bit damp from the studio. Let's get rid of those ones. Okay, so I'm going to put my baking parchment down with top next to the iron. I'll keep going on about it so that you get it right. There's nothing worse than getting glue on your iron. You won't be pleased with me. So I'm just heating the glue up again. And again, you're not pressing. It's the heat that does the work. Excuse me, you're just reheating the glue. All right, this wait it for a few seconds for that to cool down, because you don't want to pull the whole lot off. So just give it a couple of seconds. There we go. That's all stuck down. That's not going anywhere. It's a real shame you can't put this on t-shirts, isn't it? But it wouldn't be washable, so there's no point. It would all fall off if you washed it. So we've got that. What else should we put on there? I think I might put some seeds. You can use things like dried flowers, grasses, anything that's dry and relatively flat. So not beads, but you could sew those on afterwards. These are artichoke heart seeds, and they stick really nicely. And I put them on my work sometimes, some of the work that I sell, and because they're so fine, they look a bit like long stitch with thread. And people say, oh, wow, that looks wonderful. Have you done all that stitch? And sometimes I say yes, which is very naughty. But yes, these are seed heads. So they're slightly heavier than dandelion clocks, because I grow artichokes, globe artichokes. And those are the seeds in the artichoke. I'm just going to iron these down. You have to be careful not to breathe too hard, because they'll fly away. So I'm just going to put the iron on before they escape. So again, baking parchment on the top with top next to the iron. You'll get fed up with me saying it. I'll wait a few seconds. Get rid of the rest of the seeds. Try and keep tidy, Kim. And then that's all stuck down there. So you can see that's all stuck on nicely. It's not going anywhere. And that's a great background to stitch onto. I've got other things to show you, but I'm going to show you on another piece now, because these, you can put everything on a piece, but it just doesn't look quite right. I think it just looks too much. So I'm just going to get another piece of Bondaweb. So here's one I prepared earlier. So it's a slightly more smaller section now. Now I've shown you the artichoke heart seeds. I've shown you the gilding flake. I haven't shown you skeleton leaves. So I've got some skeleton leaves here. I've got some poly organza. I've got some glitter. And I've got some gilding flake. So what should we put down first? I think I might put some gilding flake down first. This is incredibly light and fluffy. If you huff and puff or sneeze, this will go everywhere. It is actually very, 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 very thin metal. It's what imitation gold leaf is made from. And these are all the little offcuts when they're packing up the proper packets of imitation gold leaf. And then they put them into jars, and they're gorgeous. And sometimes you can get all sorts of mixed colors. You can get greeny ones and bluey ones. But obviously the sort of goldy silver ones are the most popular. And when you're working in drifts, try not to work in absolutely straight lines. Think of hills and mountain ranges. You kind of don't want an absolutely straight line. You want something more organic than that. So I'm just going to pop that there. I'm going to put the lid back on again very quickly. And then what you need to do when you put your baking parchment on is be very, very careful not to create a draft. So I'm just putting on very slowly. There. Otherwise, the gilding flake will just go poof, and it'll just go all over the table, which is very annoying. So again, I think you're getting the idea now. You can just use your iron to reactivate the glue. And that's all stuck down. Just like the mica flakes did. There we are. So that's all stuck. Sometimes with the gilding flake, you'll find that the little bits of metal are all folded up on top of each other. So you'll find that there's little bits that haven't actually stuck to the Bondaweb because they're resting on another piece of gilding flake. So you can just take those off. And I'll just put them on the floor because I'll be clearing up later. So just, there we go. So you've got a good clear surface. So that's really quite pretty already. And it's certainly a lovely background to stitch onto. And I might stop there normally, but obviously I need to show you everything. So the next thing I'm going to show you is using skeleton leaves or dry grasses, whatever you fancy. I just happened to find these in the cupboard, which was very interesting because it was the Bondaweb cupboard. Now you could put skeleton leaves on whole like that, but it's kind of a bit obvious, I find. There's nothing wrong with it, but I just like to break them up so that you use the texture of them and possibly the shape of them, and play with it like that and sort of scatter the bits on. Again, going into drifts rather than really straight lines. But what you need to be careful of is obviously the Bondaweb is now covered up here, so you don't really want to put anything on there. So I'm just dropping this bit down here, that nice long piece there. So you can break up your skeleton leaf. You can have a little bit of a drift of skeleton leaves. And yes, I know the skeleton leaf is a kind of beigey color, as is the background. And you think, oh, I can't really see that. But you will see it because it's a different texture. I find when I'm building up lots of layers, I find you can either have color or texture. I don't think you can have both because your brain can't cope with it. So that's my theory. Obviously, what you do is totally up to you. Again, I'm just going to be careful how I put the baking parchment down. Again, with top next to the iron. And again, I'm just going to heat it. So, I mean, this is the great thing. Where do you stop? I just adore this. I've spent years demonstrating this at various textile shows, and it is my favorite thing. As I say, the only slightly boring thing is that you have to wait for it to cool right down at the beginning. Still a little bit warm, but I'll just, yeah, it's okay now. So the skeleton leaf is all stuck down now. You can see it's all there. And it kind of bleeds in and out, which is what I like. I don't like anything too, hello, I'm over here, waving at you. The next thing I think we'll try is some polyester or nylon organza. You know, these lovely synthetics that you can get, really shiny and pretty. What I tend to do is get a couple of squares or 3 or 4 squares, and then I just make a little sausage of them, and then I cut them up with some scissors. Just move that out of the way from it. Just cut them into little snips, just long, thin slivers. I've got 2 tones here. I've got a pinky one and I've got an orangey one. And then you can open them out and you've got some kind of hardly there color, but it just shimmers. And I tend to make up quite a few of these, and then I have little pots of different color combinations because I do use these a lot. And they're very, very pretty, and they just give you little lines of color without being as sudden as foil. Let's put a few little pink bits on. So quite thin pieces. They're quite thin. And there's no point putting anything on here now because that's covered up with a skeleton leaf. So I'll just pop that one there. And obviously you don't work like me and have everything next to the iron, which could then get stuck to the iron. I'm terrible. I make a nest when I work. I'm sure you do too. So again, just give it a minute. So all those little lines are now ironed down. So you can see it's not a very severe line, but it's just soft, and it kind of brings in the goldy bronze color as well. So it all kind of works together, and that would be a fantastic background to stitch into. It would be absolutely lovely. I'm just going to ruin it now with some glitter, because the one thing I haven't shown you is the glitter. So I'll just show you some glitter. So this is micro glitter. It's very fine. It's not like the big granular glitter that you can get from children. Let's be very careful with this, Kim, because it will go everywhere. So I'm just going to carefully, hopefully, not let too much come out, because sometimes it comes out in a rush. And then you've got to try and put it all back in the pot again. There we go. Not too much, Kim, just a little bit. So I'm just going to bring it down so it's not quite so in a straight line. There we go. I'm going to put the top back on immediately. That's still going all over the place. I'm a nightmare with glitter. So I'm just going to very gently and softly rub that in so it's not quite so blotchy. And then again, I'm going to use the baking parchment with top next to the iron. I'm just going to iron that in place. Now, you wouldn't necessarily put all of these adornments onto your Bondaweb. You can pick and choose what you do, or you can just leave it as it is, because sometimes Bondaweb painted is just so beautiful, it doesn't actually need anything. But of course, most of us have to put something on. So there we go. We've got the glitter just shining there. We've got strips of polyester organza or nylon there. We've got gilding flake, and we've got skeleton leaves on there. And on this one, we had the mica flakes, and we had the gold transfer foil, and then we had some seeds from an artichoke, but you could use dried seeds, dried flowers, anything you fancy. And then you can use it as a background to stitch into, or you could just frame that and pop it on the wall if you like it. Or you can wrap it around a canvas. If you wanted to do that, you could spray this with varnish or paint it with acrylic wax, and then you'd be able to dust it quite safely.